Yeah, so, I mean, some of you already talked to Josh, and he probably introduced himself. But Josh is a game developer from Austria who made a ton of little games. I saw you have in your slides like a little who you are situation. So I'm letting you give an intro to yourself, but the point of this talk and the point of next week's talk when Matt and Wombat is coming is that you guys essentially learn a bit about the creative process of somebody who is actively making games. And it's not me.
Hello everyone. Thanks for the invitation. I always love doing things like this because Bryn asked me hey, give a short lecture about your creative process, and then I'm like, oh, what the fuck am I even doing? And now I have to put it in a slide, and I learned a lot about things about myself. My name is Josh. I'm better known as Stuffed Wombat on the internet, where I started 10 years ago to just upload video games. I didn't go to a place like this where anyone taught me how to use Game Maker Studio. I just kind of sat down at home and pushed my head through the wall. I hit my head against the wall for a long time. I've made 70 games or something. A few of them are on Steam. Most of them are on Newgrounds and stuff. And they are for 4 years. I've been living off of the money I make from the games I sell on Steam, which is very nice. I'm not rich or something. I have a shitty salary, but I have complete control over my time for 4 years, which is very cool. I have no obligations except to make games, which is a kind of a big pressure as well. I'm just going to. This is one of the earlier games I made. It's called Pendulum. It's just you swing on it's a little, very level designy game. I made a minimalistic text adventure that's on iPhones and stuff, where you always have a choice between two things, and then you only get a single word as a reaction. I made Quomp, which is Pong, but you play the ball, and then you go through a maze. And then most recently, I worked on Mossalina, which is a puzzle game which has no solutions inside of it. So you just get some random tools, and you just have to solve a problem however you want to. So what you see with all of these games is, they're grainy as fuck because I just took some small screenshots and made them larger. But they're not very visually impressive. I'm working a lot with minimalism, I'm working a lot with design. The appeal of the game is not primarily an aesthetic one or something. It's more of an abstract thing. The main thing about my creative process is that I fucking enjoy making games. The baseline function of sitting down and making a little thing like you're doing it, it's fun for me. I just enjoy it. It makes me happy. So how does one make games? There's multiple ways in which you can go about making games, which I've I thought about this a lot 6 years ago or something, where I looked at all of my friends who were also making games, and I tried to categorize them, because I have this kind of disease where I want to put everything into categories. This is not a truth or something. But you can kind of explore. The ways to make games is you can try to explore. You can try to find something new. You can try to copy what other people have done before, or you can work, which is just setting a thing that you want to do and then just putting the effort in consistently over a long time. And I would find that some of my friends always everyone is doing exploring, everyone is stealing from other games, and everyone has to actually do the work. But there's into these three categories, I could put all of my friends kind of neatly in there. So I personally, in my own framework, I'm an explorer. What I really like is to find something new. I really want to do something. I want to experience something that I have never experienced before. On a baseline level, as a person, I want to do that as well. So I like to go out, kind of out of the comfort zone, out of the things that I'm used to. But I also need to copy, and I need to work. I need to do all aspects of the creative thing, right? What motivates me is to do something new, but how I do something new is by looking at other stuff and stealing from it, and then sitting down on my ass and working for a very long time. And so what I do, economically speaking, is I try to sell things to people that also want to experience something that has never been done before, or that's surprising, or that's unique. So that's what I live from, right? The next game I make, it has to, that's what people expect of me. People expect me to make something that they don't expect. So I have to constantly keep pushing. I have to find something that's new to me all the time. I have to keep kind of innovating. Not that it's innovative or something, but I have to keep surprising both people and myself. Because I am an explorer, and if I am not surprised and interested in what I'm doing, there's no way I'm going to enjoy the work. So the big question of like the creative process for me, for my specific setup, like for what gets me going, what allows me to sit down and do the work, the big question is, how do you find new things? That is like the big question I have to answer if I want to explain what I'm doing. Because that is the problem I have to solve all the time. There's 3 ways you can, like I said, like I really like these categories, you know, whatever. There's probably more ways, but these are the 3 I put in this presentation. The first way to find new stuff is you look very, very closely at things. Like you take a game you like, and you take like a 10-second clip from it, and you look you look at that 10-second clip over and over and over again to really understand each and every element in its like smallest form. It's like a kind of like chopping the game apart and looking at the bones, you know? Like you can kind of like look very closely at stuff, and then you will see that once you have put everything apart, there's a new way to combine that stuff. But first you have to look very closely at it to know what you're dealing with, and then you can assemble it in a new way. The other way to find new things is to look at stuff from very far away, to do the complete opposite. Instead of looking at 10 seconds from a single game over and over again, you look at like 5 games that are all made by the same studio, and you try to find the common arc, the common trajectory, kind of like how those games evolve. You try to look at how people play those games, like how the speedrunning scene for them evolves, kind of like zooming out into the larger cultural context of what is happening. It's zooming out in like a historic level, right? Like you don't even have to play the games to do that, even though it is pretty useful to do that. But you can either look very closely at stuff, or you can go very far away, and both of them will allow you to have a new perspective on whatever it is you're looking at, and new perspectives allow you to do new things. The third thing you can do to find something new is to do new stuff physically in your life. This is a very important part of my creative process. Is after a project is done, I go on some adventure. Like I recently moved back into the city and got really addicted to online dating. And before that, I went to Argentina for 2 months to experience a new culture. And to kind of like push myself to do something I'm very scared of. Because when I do that, it allows me to recontextualize everything I've been doing, and allows me to see the world from a new perspective. Which is what you need to do new stuff, which is what I need to do to make money so I can eat. So these 3 ways you could kind of like summarize them. Like you can deconstruct stuff, or you can abstract stuff, or you can broaden your horizons. That's like one aspect of the creative process. This is how you find new things, according to me. Please prove me wrong. Like if I say anything and you're like, that's not right, please go out of your way to tell me that I'm wrong and to show me that I'm wrong. I'll be happy to argue later. Another important thing about about my creative process is if I'm not interested in what I'm doing, I will just not do it. It's like without interest, there's nothing that happens. I am very lazy in that regard. There's this kind of notion that you have to wait for inspiration, or that inspiration somehow comes to you, but inspiration actually comes from being interested in stuff. From looking at it from a very close perspective, or from a perspective that is very far away, or from looking at stuff that you've never looked at before. If you're interested in whatever it is you're looking at, and however you're looking at it, inspiration will come. And it's always very scary, because after finishing the project there's like a depression phase, and it always feels like I will never be interested in anything again, but it comes back every time. So I'm going to go through some stuff that I'm interested in right now to give you a sense of what my creative process is right now. I'm interested in anarchy, in like the concept of living without hierarchies, or with as little hierarchies as possible, which is very complicated. It goes into like a lot of social and interpersonal stuff, which is just a great field of stuff where a lot of crazy people have written a lot of interesting things. I'm interested in interactive fiction, which is like the computer gives me some options and I pick one of those options and then I get a little short story based on that. I will not get into that, that's a whole lecture on its own. I'm interested in gardens. Gardens are a kind of system that exists on its own and you interact with it. You try to kind of force it to be in a specific way, but at the same time the garden is completely outside of your control. Like the climate is changing. My grandmother has a garden and she is responding to climate change by planting different things. So even though it's a space that's under your control, you're also under the control of the weather. So I've been thinking a lot about that. That's like, I'm in the phase right now where I'm just thinking about a lot of stuff. This is one of the topics. I'm interested in BDSM, like in bondage and sadomasochism, because it's very close to how games work. Like the computer kind of forces you to do something, and if you don't do it, nothing happens. So there's a kind of inherent tension there, where you also have kind of like a strange overlap between some game designers and the BDSM scene, where people design games for BDSM. So I'm looking into that a lot. And I'm interested in money. It's like, oh, I have like 1 year of money left, and then I need to make something that sells again. Otherwise, I have to get a real job, which I don't want to do. So I'm thinking about like what is currently happening in the market. Like what is hip, what is cool. Not that I'm actively trying to follow that, I just need to be aware of what is going on to eventually make a product that will allow me to come here on a Thursday or whatever and not have to go to the office and to instead be able to talk with you. So I just think about these things. That's a large part of what I'm doing right now. And I have to kind of be confident that all of this thinking will somehow end up in something that I can make. And then when I've thought about it for long enough, sometimes I do a specific experiment, and I think this is way too long, but I'll just keep going. Stop me if I'm way over time.
You're good.
Okay. I do specific experiments. So when I've thought about something for long enough, when I think about gardens, right? Like I think about gardens and then I'm able to abstract two forces that are important in the garden. Like the weather and your actions, right? And those are two things. And then I can represent them in a game somehow, because I've abstracted them out of this specific thinking I do, and then I can make an experiment where I can make like, what happens if the weather just always gets worse, right? Like you are gardening and the weather always gets worse and your garden just slowly decays. How does that feel? I'm not trying to make a game, I'm not trying to make anything that anyone else will ever play, I'm just running an experiment, right? It's like, how does this thing feel? And I put this actually in the code, and then I check it out, and then it usually sucks. You know, it's like, oh, that's really a shitty thing. That I don't care about that. That's not interesting. There's nothing there. But I run a lot of these experiments on a lot of different things, and then some of them work, right? Like I think 1.5 years ago, I did like a test where I combined like a visual novel with a very hard like maze game, and then how you solve the maze determines what happens in the visual novel. And that baseline connection felt very interesting to me. So that concept has been in what I call like my brain rotation, where it's like, okay, I'm sitting somewhere and I'm like, okay, I kind of feel like working. Let's pick one of the things I have in my brain rotation, like one of the concepts, one of the experiments that worked, and now I'll think about that and try to work with that again. And again, that is not a very concrete way. I'm not sitting down, I'm not making a production schedule, I'm not setting a deadline. I'm just trying to see if this is still interesting to me. Because if it's not interesting to me, there's no fucking way I'm going to do anything. And another thing is that I don't get serious about doing the actual work, you know, like you can work or copy or explore, and I will always go explore. As long as somebody doesn't stop me, as long as my bank account doesn't stop me, I will just think about gardens for 2 years, you know, and I'll be kind of happy. But then I'll be like, oh shit, I need to make some money, outside pressure is coming, and then I start to work. Like that is a baseline part of everything I've ever made. It's like, until I have money problems, I don't do anything. I mean, I do a lot of stuff, but I'm not trying to finish a game. And then I'm very slow about committing to a project. Like a lot of the times I talk to people who are starting to make games and they're like, yeah, I have this grand vision, I have this thing, I'm really committed to it, and it feels like that's too soon, you know? Like from my perspective, it takes like 1 year or 2 years for one of these ideas to become enough experimented on to be something that I feel really confident in doing for like a full production. But when I say I will do something, this is very crucial for getting collaborators. When I say I'm going to make this, the thing always gets released. I think there's 1 or 2 projects that got cancelled out of like 60, which is a very good margin, right? Like once I say I will do it, it gets done. Sometimes it's really trash and doesn't sell, and sometimes the process fucking sucks. But once I commit, I commit. That's a very, very important part because it gives me a large space to kind of like experiment, and then I switch to a production. So let's look at what the production looks like for me. It's a development process because funnily enough, all of the next slides will start with E. This is another thing I really like, is like alliterations. Whatever, it's not really important. The first thing you do is you explore, right? Like in the creative process. This is the thing I've been talking about a lot, where it's like, you just have to kind of see what is out there. What is a garden? What happens in BDSM? What happens in, I don't know, Swedish politics right now? All of these things that are out there, and then you just pick up the stuff that is interesting. The first step is to explore. The second step is to experiment, you know? It's like, now I have a kind of solid grasp of what this area is, and now what happens if I do this? What happens if I change this? What happens if I take this concept and flip it on its head? Or if I take the boss fight and put it at the beginning, or whatever. Just running experiments and seeing what happens without trying to achieve a specific result. And then the next very important thing is trying to find an expression, trying to find something that I want to say, that I want to express through this game. This doesn't need to be something, a concrete narrative or something. This can just be like, I think all JRPGs are too long, so I'm going to make the shortest JRPG ever. And that's something I want to express. That's a concrete thing that allows me to work on a specific issue. Like without this expression, sometimes it's also called like a North Star or something like that. There's a bunch of terms for this, where whenever in development you have a problem, you can go back to this and be like, how do I solve this problem in a way that furthers what I want to say, that helps what I want to say? So this is really important to find. If I don't find this expression, I will not commit to making it into a full production. Because without this, any full production is kind of doomed. It's not doomed, but it becomes much more hard. And then execution begins for real, where it's like, now I'm opening the project in the engine that I will actually ship. So now I have to take more care about the code has to be cleaner. Before this, I would just make stuff and throw it away and then remake it. But now shit is getting solid and real and put down, and I have to take more care about that. At the beginning of the execution, I try to start with what I call a skeleton, which is the complete game, playable from start to finish in a very abstracted way. If we make a narrative game about being in this university and going through these spaces, you just make all of the rooms, and they can be empty, they can be ugly, it doesn't matter, but as long as there's like a character in there that says like, you've reached the end, and then you put other characters in between, like a very, very abstract version of the full thing. Because once you do that, you have the whole thing, you can actually see how much over scope you are. Because you're like, oh, I have like 5 people there, and I want every person to have like this really involved dialogue, and then you basically always struggle just writing the first sentence for each person. And when you do that, you realize, oh shit, maybe I cannot fit 5 people in there, maybe it needs to be 3. So then you can already cut. In the middle of the execution, what happens to me always is that I'm very confident that I cut it back down enough, and then I just keep adding more stuff. I have an idea here, an idea there, everything goes in, the whole thing becomes really large and kind of heavy, and not very flexible anymore. Which is, you know, it's a fun, you just add stuff, it feels cool. And then when you want to finish, if you want to finish, or at least if I want to finish, I need to take what I have made and cut it. Like, just remove a lot of the cool ideas I had and just rip them out mercilessly. It's always very hard to realize that I've put too much stuff in my game and I need to take some of it away. But once I take it away, there's like imagine that you have like, whatever. It's like you have the game and then you rip some parts out of the game and you realize that now that, because there is a hole, there's like something missing, the game suddenly feels more interesting in a way. Or like you allow people to make their own connections, it becomes more radical and stuff. And so cutting stuff away is always what I do right before the project gets finished. And then after that comes the exhaustion, right? Like I'm really, really deeply exhausted after finishing a project like that. You've experienced it probably as well here, when you sit down and you make a game and you can show it here, and then you know you have to make the next one already, but it's like you're still kind of like dealing with the fallout from working on the first one. It's just when you make something that comes out of you, that you're really interested in, that you have put work in, that you have like cared about in some way and thought about a lot, and then suddenly it's gone, there's just a hole in your life. And like the bigger the project, the bigger the hole, the more work you put in, the longer it takes to get out of that. But it's a very common thing called post-launch depression, and it's just part of the development process. You can find ways to make that less horrible, you can make it into like a post-launch headache instead of a post-launch depression, right? Like through self-care and taking distance from the process and all of that. But this is, it always happens, every time. I was talking to a friend and I was like, oh my God, you know, I don't know, like what should I do with my life? Who am I? What am I doing? Oh my God. And the friend was like, dude, every time you finish a project, you say this. And I've completely forgotten that every time I finish a project, I say this, but from his perspective, like every year for a few months, I'm just like, that's just a part of the deal. I'm trying to not slide into like bad behavior during that time, which is working better, but it's just, that's what happens. So that's kind of like the development process, right? Like the development process with all of the E's. First you explore, you see what interests you, then you experiment, you take something that interests you and see what happens when you change it. Then you try to find something you want to express through that, or most likely something you want to express will just come to you. And then the challenge is that you have to accept that you actually want to say this, like that you want to kind of like stand on a stage and be like, I'm making a game about BDSM, which is kind of like scary personally, but once you do that, you can proceed, or like I can proceed, to executing the thing, and as soon as the execution is finished, I'm exhausted. And then what happens, or like the stage I'm in right now, I'm like in between exhaustion and exploration. So I've been really exhausted for like a year basically, and now slowly I have the energy and the brain again to be interested in stuff, and I'm exploring again. All of this that I'm talking to you here comes from a perspective of confidence and security. I've been making games for 10 years. I've made 50 Newground games in like a couple of years, you know, like I have finished a lot of projects. I have also finished a lot of commercial projects. So that when you have not done that, there is a huge anxiety and a huge fear with everything you do, because there is just no information that you have about what will happen once you're finished. And you start to get all of these crazy ideas about what you want to happen after you finish. And then when reality is different, that's really scary, right? And so like a lot of the people who are starting to make games, I see struggle a lot with the confidence, which is something you only get by doing it. Like you do it, and then if you enjoy it, you do it again, and then slowly you realize that there's certain patterns, and you develop an intuition, which is a horrible thing to say to university students because you cannot teach intuition. Intuition happens when you're interested in stuff over a long period of time. And I'm also talking from a perspective of material security. Like I have money now for a year, but if my money runs out and all of my funding runs out, I have like connections to people in the industry and I can ask them for money. So I'm not really worried about becoming homeless. And I've never had to worry about becoming homeless because I could always have moved back in with my parents. So my creative process is like happening inside of a protected layer, where on the one hand I have built up confidence for myself that I can finish stuff, and I know how Steam works, and I know that there's like publishers who will take these games and put them on consoles and I can make some more money. Confidence and security is where all of this is coming from. It's still always scary. If it is not scary, if the development process is not scary, then it's also not interesting. That's the kind of strange thing, right? Like, if I'm not thinking that maybe I'm showing too much of myself, or maybe I'm doing something that is really stupid or useless, or that nobody would ever care about, if I'm not thinking that, then usually the project I'm working on is not interesting enough. You know, you have like a little police person in your head who is telling you like, no, this is too radical, this is too scary, this is too revealing of who you are, you should not do this. You should instead make a Super Mario clone, and it's just exactly the same game that has been made 200,000 times, because that's the safe option. So for me, the creative process is always scary. If it's not scary, that's like a warning sign in my head that I'm not pushing myself enough. There's the fear of failure, which pervades everything, right? Like everything you do could fail or it could succeed. That's never going to go away. It's just never, like when you release your first game on itch.io, you're like, oh my god, nobody will care about this. When I release my like 80th game on Steam, it's like, oh no, nobody will care about this. It's just the same, you know, it's just on different like confidence levels where you're like, oh, I have felt this fear a lot of times before, so it's less raw, but it's still there, and it never goes away. And if you fail in the if I fail in my creative process, you know, if I'm trying to execute on an idea and it doesn't work, then what I do is I go back one step in the list, you know. Like if I try to execute and it's not working, I'm like, okay, obviously I don't really have something I want to express. So I need to think about the previous step again. And if I don't find something I want to express, I have to go back to experimentation and all the way back. It's kind of like a board game where you like go forward, and if you fail, you go back. And it's okay to go back. Nobody is going to be sad or mad about that. Success in my creative process means to be exhausted, like reaching the end of that line. Like when I am exhausted, I know that I have done something real. I have done real work that I am happy with. Success is releasing the game, getting it actually out there, because if you don't release the thing, even if you think it's finished, but if you never show it to anyone, then it will always live in your head like a ghost, kind of like. Especially if the game is unfinished, you will always be like, oh, but you know, I have this project that is almost done, and I just need to do these few things, and then you think that thought for like 2 years, and it just takes up a lot of space in your brain. So to release a game is to kind of like get rid of it, and that is part of the success for me. So the success of the creative process for me is to find something that's new to me, getting interested in it enough to be able to work on it, and then finding a way to make others appreciate it, putting it into a package that people can interact with, because that's what I know, that's what I need to make money, right? It's like I'm an explorer type game developer. I like to go to a new place, or to a place that I have not been. Doesn't mean that the place is inherently new. I like to go to a place where I have never been, and I like to take something and change it and show it to others. And here's just the summary of everything I've just said. It's that to find something new, I can deconstruct stuff. You know, I can take it apart into really small atoms and look at each atom individually. I can abstract stuff, which means to take a large area of stuff and kind of summarize it and look at it as a cohesive whole. Or I can broaden my horizon and go out and do something new. That's how I find the stuff that keeps me interesting and allows me to go through the explore, experiment, express, execute, and exhaustion. Like I need to find something new in order to have the motivation to go through the development process. Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you. Josh?
Yes?
What is your favorite game right now? Like, that you made?
That I made.
Can you just repeat the question so it get asked?
Yes. The question was what my favorite game that I've made is. That's a very good question. I don't know. It's like, I'm very happy what the last one did, Mussolina, which made all of the money I'm living from now. It's like the most successful game commercially I've ever done. I guess I'm very happy it did that. But it's like, once the project is finished, I tend to look at it very critically. And I'm like, oh, you know, here's the thing. And I tried to express a specific thing. But then when it's finished and I look back, I'm like, actually I failed in what I wanted to do. And so, of course, I'm happy that it's found the connection and that it allows me to keep going. But I tend, everything I make, it takes like 5 years and then I can appreciate it and be like, oh, that was nice. So, yeah.
Because it's one of my favorite games.
Oh, nice!
Yeah, like, I didn't realize that you were the one who made Mussolini and all the other games. Basically my childhood.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah. So, I'm really happy about that.
That's very cool. Yeah, it's very surreal. I think my favorite thing that comes from a game I made is like people in school sending me videos of them playing my games in computer class instead of doing the computer work. Because I did the same thing in computer class and it was just very crazy to see that repeated. Yeah. Yeah. Do we have any other question? It was a lot of stuff. I'm sorry, it's like... Cool. Just ask away, yes.
Do you make the sprites and everything, or do you have someone else working on it, the art style?
For this one, I made the sprites myself. It's very based on the work of another game developer who I like very much. Like it looks very similar. It's kind of derivative. I enjoy the process of like setting up a color scheme and setting up kind of rules. Like what you can see here is that all of the tiles have very flat surfaces and all of the tools have like more, like there's a kind of visual hierarchy to this. And the color schemes and stuff, I like setting stuff like that up. I can't really draw. So like the graphic, I got an artist for that. The thumbnail, that thing here. Yeah. Yeah, but usually I make the art myself just because it's faster. Like it's just so much faster to just quickly draw something. And there's like a couple of drawing techniques that I learned from other indie game developers where, yeah, it's like that JW talk and like Tito gave some talks where it's like they just explain very quickly how to make very basic visuals that work.
Both of these talks are in the bibliography arena now, by the way.
Ayo.
So if you want to go search for them.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll ask your quintuple E process. If you look at like one game that you made, what does the quintuple E for it look like?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I wanna take the whole presentation and write it up for my blog, so that
okay.
so I will do that for that. Yeah.
But like, could you give us like a quick rundown, of like I don't know, like maybe not for Mussolina, but like for presenter,
producer,
or something like that.
Yeah.
Can you just maybe open it in Steam? So
True. I just also need to look at the list. Yeah, so this is a visual novella, like it's. What? Oh no, I'm not having a stroke, I swear.
Oh, fine.
There's few things worse than a keyboard that you're not used to.
There you go.
Yeah. This is a very unusual game for me that I made to try to do something completely different again, where I try to challenge myself to write basically a visual novel in my own way. So the exploration for that was just me trying to figure out how visual novels work. And I looked at a lot of visual novel engines. I looked at Ren'Py and Suica and all of the like frameworks that exist, and I found that they were all not visual enough for me. Like that in the exploration process, I realized, none of the tools that exist work for me. And then the big experiment was if I could make my own tool that is visually, I think there's some screenshot, whatever. I will just explain it. It's like the game runs on a framework I wrote myself, which is like a grid-based thing. It's like arrows, and then the story goes up and down and left and sideways and all of that stuff. So that was a big part of the experimentation, was trying to figure out a way, how can I make a software that allows me to make a visual novel? And then, so I was exploring, I realized, oh shit, there's no tool that I can use. Then I experimented until I had my own tool. And then the big trouble was, what do I even want to say? Like a story is much more implicitly a story than a video game. Like it's like in a video game I would always do mechanics and stuff, but here I had to write something and I had to talk about specific things. So the expression part was really difficult. And what I settled on essentially was I took the creative process, which I've been talking about here, and I made a story about that, where I said you can either explore or you can copy or you can work. In this game, you have to find 3 freelancers, and one of the freelancers really likes to explore, and one of the freelancers really likes to copy, and one of the freelancers really likes to work, and they all have a specific problem, and you need to kind of help them. So that's how I constructed the expression, like something I wanted to say out of, because I didn't have a lot of real life experience of like stuff I wanted to talk about outside of making stuff. So it's a game about making stuff, but once I had found that, I could move on to actually making it, which then, just went. I had a medical emergency in the middle of development, and I paused it for a while. But in the end, just getting the beginning in the game was super fun. The middle was absolutely horrifying, and then finishing it up was one of the happiest times of my life. Where, when I ripped chunks out of the game, I was talking a lot about producer, where it's like I set up this narrative structure. And then I wanted it to branch very heavily, to have all of these different versions. And then I just realized that I couldn't write that much text, and I had to rip some of the branches out and shorten some text. And that process of making it all kind of merge back into a concrete ending, that was really, really fucking nice. And then I was really exhausted afterwards for 2 months or something. And then I immediately set out and traveled to Argentina. I was like, okay, now I have done this. I just watched TV for 2 months, and now I'm going to do something new again, so I don't get stuck in the exhaustion for too long. And that's kind of like the loop for that project in that way. But you have to be careful with these frameworks. Like they are very abstract. I'm just trying to like explain how stuff happened. Doesn't mean it has to happen in the same way for you or anyone else. It could also very well be that I'm just imagining a perfect development process for you. You know, and it's fucking bullshit. Who knows? But that's how I feel about it right now. If I change my opinion, I will issue a apology.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
Anybody else have questions?
Cool.
Okay. All right, thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah.
And listening to me. It's always very nice.
We will take like a 15-minute break, and then you can come here and work on projects. And if you will have any technical questions, you can come to me, and I will help you out. And otherwise, you can also go home if you want to work from home or like not work now or whatever. Right? You're free to do what you want, but I'm gonna be here until 1, and I will be here to give you technical ideas if you need. Okay? Cool. Thank you, Josh.
Can I get in without a card?
No.
Okay.
I'll go out
Can I
with you.
have the card?
No, I'll go out with you. I want not a smoke, but like I need a break to get out of this room for a second.
How are you going to get your autograph? Because this is so surreal.
It's very strange.
Yeah.